The marble lobby shimmered beneath morning light, a cathedral of glass and chrome where footsteps echoed like distant thunder. People in dark suits swept past, their voices clipped, their eyes fixed on glowing screens. No one saw the small girl standing at the center of the storm. She held a wrinkled envelope pressed tight against her chest, fingers trembling with the weight of something far larger than herself. Her shoes were scuffed, her knees bruised from a hurried journey across a city that did not care who she was. But her eyes, clear, fierce, and impossibly blue, did not waver. "Please, sir, can you read this letter?" Her voice, fragile yet unflinching, slipped through the lobby's sterile hum. A security guard froze. The receptionist looked up. For a breath, the endless rhythm of business stopped. The girl's name was Mira Caldwell, 7 years old, alone. She had crossed half the city with only bus fare and her mother's directions, clutching the envelope as if it were the last thread holding her world together. Her mother's words still echoed in her head. "Find him. Don't give up, no matter what they say." Behind the reception desk, Grace Nolan, a woman who had seen everything from arrogant executives to desperate job seekers, felt her heart twist. She leaned forward. "Sweetheart, where are your parents?" Mira shook her head. "Mom's sick. She said I have to find Mr. Ethan Vale. He's the most important man here." She lifted the envelope with both hands. "She said this letter could save us." Grace glanced toward the elevator bank. 40 floors above, Ethan Vale ruled Vale Dynamics, one of the city's most powerful architecture firms. He was known for his brilliance and for the silence that followed him like a shadow. Grace hesitated only a moment before picking up the phone. Upstairs, Ethan sat alone in his office, a tower of glass overlooking the restless sprawl below. Drafts and blueprints spread across his desk, ordered and immaculate. His reflection floated in the window, sharp suit, gray eyes, expression carved from stone. The intercom buzzed. "Mr. Vale," Grace said, her voice uncertain. "There's a little girl here. She says she has a letter for you. Says it's life or death." Ethan pinched the bridge of his nose. He had no time for interruptions, especially not from children. But something in Grace's tone, soft, pleading, stopped him. "Send her up." Moments later, the elevator doors parted with a whisper. Mira stepped out, clutching the envelope, her small frame dwarfed by marble floors and glass walls. Her eyes scanned the corridor until they found the double doors at the end. She knocked 3 times. "Come in." Ethan's voice was calm, precise. She pushed the door open. He looked up, and the world tilted. The child's eyes mirrored his own. Same hue, same steady light. For a second, his breath caught. A phantom memory stirred. Laughter in a rain-soaked garden, the scent of lavender, a goodbye left unfinished. Mira walked forward with solemn purpose and placed the envelope on his desk. "My mom wrote this. She said you have to read it right now." Ethan hesitated, then took it. The paper was soft from her grip, edges worn smooth by fear. The handwriting on the front, elegant, trembling, spelled his name in ink that bled slightly at the corners. As he opened it, a faint scent of lavender rose from the fold. "Ethan, if you're reading this, time is running out. My name is Lena Caldwell. You once knew me as Lena Hart. 8 years ago, we built a world together and then watched it fall apart. But something of that world survived. Her name is Mira." His hands shook. "I never told you the truth because you believed lies I couldn't fight. But you have a daughter. She is everything good we once were. I am ill, Ethan, terminal, and she has no one else. You were told you could never be a father. You were wrong." The words blurred. Ethan stared at the girl now tracing patterns on his desk with nervous fingers. She was real, breathing, watching him with cautious hope. He whispered, "How old are you?" 7. The number landed like thunder. 7 years. Exactly the time since Lena had vanished from his life, leaving behind silence and unanswered questions. Before he could speak again, the door opened. Clara Monroe, his operations manager and closest confidant, stepped inside. "Ethan, you have the investors waiting in conference room 2, her voice faltered when she saw the child. "Who is this?" Mira turned, clutching her envelope again, though it was already open. Ethan stood slowly. "This is Mira Caldwell. She brought me a message." Clara's gaze shifted between them, confusion flickering into unease. "You don't know her?" "Not yet," he said. The silence that followed was heavy, threaded with recognition neither could explain. Clara cleared her throat. "Should I reschedule the meeting?" Ethan's eyes stayed on Mira. "Yes. Cancel everything." Clara blinked, startled, then left without a word. Ethan knelt beside the girl. "Where's your mother now?" "She's at home. She said the doctors can't fix her anymore. She told me to find you before it's too late." Her voice trembled, but she didn't cry. Ethan reached for the letter again, reading the final lines. "If you ever cared for me, even once, please don't let her face this world alone. She deserves truth. She deserves you." He folded the paper carefully, as if it might shatter. For the first time in years, the walls around his heart shifted, cracks forming where light could enter. He looked at Mira, at the determination in her small frame, the echo of a love he had buried beneath success and solitude. Outside, the city pulsed on, indifferent. Inside, something ancient and fragile began to stir. Mira tilted her head, studying him. "Will you help us?" Ethan opened his mouth, but no words came. Only a whisper of recognition, a question too heavy to answer. The lavender scent lingered in the air. The letter lay between them like a bridge across lost years. He looked out the window, the skyline blurring beneath rising mist, then back at the child who had crossed the city to find him. Something in his chest shifted, quiet but certain. He reached for his phone. "Let's go see your mother." Mira's eyes brightened, a spark of relief breaking through fear. In the reflection of the glass, Ethan saw them both, man and child, strangers and something more. The city loomed beyond, waiting. He closed the letter, slipped it into his pocket, and opened the door. The future waited on the other side. The city pressed close around them as the car glided through traffic, headlights streaking across the windshield like fragments of memory. Ethan Vale gripped the steering wheel with hands too steady for the storm inside him. Beside him, Mira sat upright in her seat, her small backpack resting on her knees, her eyes tracking the skyline as if memorizing every tower. She had given him directions in a voice that wavered between confidence and exhaustion. Now, silence filled the space between them, thick with unspoken questions. Ethan tried to find words, but each one tasted fragile, unfinished. "Your mother," he said finally, his voice low. "She told you to find me." Mira nodded. "She said you'd know what to do." He glanced at her reflection in the rearview mirror, eyes like his, calm but searching. He wondered if Lena had rehearsed this moment, if she'd told Mira what to say, or if this was a desperate child's last hope. The streets narrowed as they entered the older quarter of the city. Brick buildings leaned close, their windows glowing with soft light. Mira pointed ahead. "That's our building, the blue one with the white steps." Ethan parked by the curb, stepping out into the chill air. The scent of rain hung heavy, the world wrapped in a hushed gray. Mira climbed the stairs ahead of him, her small hand brushing the rusted railing. She unlocked the door with a key that looked too big for her fingers. The apartment was small but fiercely tidy, everything in its place. A thin blanket folded on the couch, dishes drying by the sink, a vase of wildflowers on the table. Light streamed through gauze curtains, falling across the worn rug like a quiet blessing. Lena Caldwell appeared from the hallway, a ghost of the woman he had once known. Her hair was cropped short, thin from illness, her face pale yet luminous. When she saw him, her breath caught. "Ethan." Her voice was soft, but it struck him like a chord he hadn't heard in years. "Lena," he said, though the name felt both foreign and familiar on his tongue. For a moment, they simply looked at each other. The silence was fragile, like a thread drawn taut between past and present. Mira stepped forward, clutching her mother's sleeve. "I found him, Mom." Lena smiled faintly and brushed a hand over her daughter's hair. "You did well, sweetheart. Go wash up. We'll talk soon." When the girl disappeared into her room, Lena gestured for Ethan to sit. He chose the armchair near the window, unable to relax. She lowered herself onto the couch, folding her hands in her lap to still their tremor. "I wasn't sure you'd come," she said. Ethan leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "I read the letter. I didn't know what to believe." Her eyes flickered with pain. "I imagine you thought it was another lie." He didn't answer. The years between them hung heavy. 8 years of silence, of truths twisted by voices he'd trusted. "Why now?" he asked quietly. "Why send her to me like that?" "Because time is short," Lena whispered, "and because she deserves the truth before I'm gone." Her words hit him harder than he expected. "Gone? I have late-stage cancer. The treatment slowed it, but they can't stop it anymore." She tried to smile, but her voice broke. "I wanted to fight long enough to see her safe." He stared at her, a hollow ache forming behind his ribs. "You should have told me sooner." "I tried." Her hands clenched. "You wouldn't take my calls. The last thing I heard was your assistant telling me you didn't want to hear my name again." Ethan felt the old anger flicker, not at her, but at himself, for believing what others had whispered. He remembered the photos, the anonymous messages, the cruel certainty that had ended everything. He swallowed hard. "They told me you'd been unfaithful." Her eyes widened. "That's what they said?" He nodded. "I never betrayed you," Lena said, her voice trembling but sure. "I loved you. Even when you turned away, I loved you." Silence fell again. Outside, a siren wailed and faded. Mira's laughter floated from her room, high and fragile as wind chimes. Ethan pressed his palms together, trying to ground himself. "You're saying she's mine." Lena met his gaze, unflinching. "She is. I know what the doctors told you years ago, but they were wrong. She's living proof." He wanted to believe her, but the weight of old wounds held him back. "There are tests," he murmured. "Yes," she nodded. "Take them, whatever proof you need. But look at her, Ethan. You already know." Her words sank deep, stirring something he'd buried. Faith, maybe, or longing. He remembered Mira's eyes, the stubborn tilt of her chin, the quiet strength she carried like armor. Lena reached for a folded envelope on the table and slid it across to him. "This is everything. Her birth records, the doctor's reports. I kept it all. I knew one day you'd need to see." He took it, hands unsteady. In the hallway, Mira peeked from behind the doorframe, clutching a stuffed fox to her chest. "Are you mad at Mommy?" she asked, her voice small. Ethan turned toward her, the question piercing deeper than he expected. "No," he said softly. just trying to understand. Mira stepped out, crossing the room to stand beside her mother. Mommy says being brave means doing the right thing, even when it hurts. Lena stroked her hair, tears glinting in her eyes. Ethan rose slowly. I'll arrange the test tomorrow. His voice was steady again, but something inside him had shifted. Lena nodded, relief mingling with fear. Thank you. He paused at the door, looking back at the two figures framed in the dim light. The woman he'd lost, the child who might be his. I'll be back, he said. As he stepped into the fading daylight, the air felt different, thicker, alive with memory and possibility. In the car, he unfolded the letter once more, tracing the ink where her hand had pressed hardest. She deserves truth. She deserves you. The city blurred past, but his mind stayed in that small apartment filled with warmth and fragility. He saw Lena's eyes, weary but unbroken, and Mira's courage shining through fear. For the first time in years, the emptiness he'd built around himself cracked open. He did not yet know what truth awaited him, but he felt the echo of something once sacred returning, a promise buried beneath silence, rising again like dawn. The next morning arrived wrapped in pale light and quiet rain. Ethan Vale sat at his kitchen table, a mug of untouched coffee cooling beside his phone. The letter from Lena lay open before him, its words bleeding faintly into the paper where a drop of water had fallen. He couldn't tell if it was rain from his coat or something else entirely. He had built a life on precision, lines, angles, plans that could not falter. But now, nothing felt certain. The city beyond the window pulsed with the rhythm of 1,000 unseen lives, indifferent to the unraveling of his own. The phone vibrated. Dr. Calder, a longtime colleague from the firm's health program, had arranged the paternity test through a discreet clinic. Come in before noon, the message read. Bring the child if you can. He hesitated, reading the message twice, then 3 times. The word child anchored itself in his chest. When he arrived at Lena's apartment, Mira was already dressed, her backpack slung over one shoulder. She smiled when she saw him, shy but steady. Lena stood behind her, pale from another sleepless night, her hands clasped tightly together. I told her about the test, Lena said softly. She understands. Mira nodded, stepping closer to him. You just have to take a little swab from my mouth, right? Like a cotton candy stick. Ethan almost smiled, something like that. They drove in silence through streets slick with rain. Mira pressed her face to the window, watching reflections ripple across the glass. At every stoplight, Ethan caught glimpses of her in the mirror, the shape of her eyes, the arch of her brow, echoes of someone he had loved and lost. At the clinic, a nurse guided them into a small white room. The walls smelled faintly of antiseptic and lavender soap. The test took only minutes, a simple sweep of cotton against the inside of their cheeks. Mira watched with curiosity, brave but uncertain. Will it hurt? She asked. Not at all, Ethan promised. She giggled when the swab brushed her tongue. It tickles. When it was over, she looked up at him expectantly. Now you'll know the truth? He crouched to meet her eyes. Soon. But truth takes more than tests, Mira. It takes courage. She tilted her head, thoughtful. Mommy says courage is doing the right thing when nobody claps for you. He swallowed hard. She's right. Back in the waiting room, Lena sat with her coat pulled close around her thin shoulders. Her skin was pale as porcelain, and there was a shadow beneath her eyes that hadn't been there before. When she saw Ethan, something unspoken passed between them, a memory of what they'd once shared, and the distance that had swallowed it whole. They left the clinic together, but outside the air was colder, sharper. Ethan walked them to their door, his words heavy and unfinished. "I'll let you know as soon as the results come." Lena nodded. "Ethan," he paused, "no matter what the test says, thank you for being here." He didn't trust himself to answer. He turned and walked away, the sound of her voice lingering behind him like the echo of a song he couldn't forget. That evening, the office felt foreign. Lights burned across polished floors, but the space seemed hollow, sterile. Clara Monroe appeared at his doorway, holding a file. "You missed the investor call," she said gently. "Is everything all right?" He rubbed the back of his neck. "Not yet." Clara stepped inside, closing the door behind her. "You've been distant lately. I've known you 6 years, Ethan. I can tell when something's wrong." He studied her face, loyal, kind, perceptive, but there were things she couldn't fix, wounds older than her friendship. "A personal matter," he said finally. "Something I should have faced a long time ago." She nodded slowly, sensing boundaries she wouldn't cross. "Whatever it is, don't carry it alone. You've done that too long." When she left, silence reclaimed the room. Ethan turned toward the window. Rain streaked the glass, each drop tracing a path that vanished into the city lights. His reflection stared back at him, calm, distant, unfamiliar. He thought of Lena's hands shaking as she poured tea, of Mira's small voice asking if he would still come back tomorrow. The image struck deeper than he expected. He remembered the day Lena had vanished from his life. The photos that arrived without warning, grainy, cruel. The message whispered by a voice he had trusted. "She's lying to you. She's not who you think she is." He'd believed it, and in believing, he had lost everything. Now, with each passing hour, the certainty he had clung to began to fracture. What if the lies had not come from her, but from someone else? Someone with something to gain from keeping them apart. When the results arrived, he promised himself, he would face whatever truth emerged, whether it redeemed him or broke him again. As night deepened, Ethan left the office and walked the city streets without destination. Neon lights shimmered in puddles, reflections blurring beneath his steps. He passed strangers wrapped in their own silence, each face a flicker of life he'd never know. Outside a small bookstore, he paused. Through the glass, a father knelt beside his daughter, helping her choose a story. Their laughter rose faintly through the window. Something inside him shifted, an ache, sharp and tender, like the memory of light in a long, dark room. Back home, the penthouse greeted him with its usual stillness. The walls gleamed, the floors spotless, but the air felt lifeless. He placed Lena's letter on the table beside an untouched dinner. The lavender scent rose again, fragile but persistent. He read her final line once more. "She deserves truth. She deserves you." For the first time, he allowed himself to whisper the thought aloud. "And maybe I deserve her." The city outside whispered against the glass, a chorus of rain and distant sirens. He leaned back, eyes closed, and let the silence settle over him. Not the cold emptiness he had known, but a silence alive with possibility. Somewhere across the city, Mira would be sleeping now, clutching her stuffed fox, dreaming of a man she believed might be her father. He wondered if she dreamed of him as he truly was, or as he could yet become. Tomorrow he would have answers. But tonight, for the first time in years, he allowed hope to breathe. The results arrived 2 days later, sealed in a plain white envelope. Ethan Vale sat alone in his office. The city's morning light fractured across the glass, his reflection divided by steel frames. The hum of the building pressed in around him, distant voices, the low thrum of elevators. But inside his walls, there was only silence. The envelope waited on his desk like a living thing. His name printed neatly in the corner. No fanfare, no explanation, just truth, folded between thin sheets of paper. He stared at it for a long time, afraid to open it. For the first time in years, he realized he was not ready for an answer. Either way, the world would change. The knock came softly. Clara Monroe stepped inside, her eyes searching his face. "Is that it?" He nodded. "The paternity test." She crossed the room, setting down a stack of files. "Do you want me to stay?" He hesitated, then shook his head. "No, this is mine to face." Clara studied him for a moment, then laid a hand on his shoulder. Steady, warm, wordless. "Whatever it says, it doesn't define who you are." When she left, the quiet returned, heavier than before. Ethan picked up the envelope, sliding a finger beneath the flap. The paper tore with a whisper. He unfolded the report slowly. The words were clinical, stripped of emotion. Probability of paternity, 0.0%. The air left his lungs in a rush. His hands tightened around the page until it creased. Not his child. The phrase echoed through him, hollow and cold. He stood and crossed to the window, staring at the skyline that had once felt like proof of his control. Now, every tower seemed distant, untouchable. He thought of Mira's eyes, her laugh, the way she had clutched his hand in the clinic. He thought of Lena's trembling voice. "You already know." Had she lied? Or had life simply betrayed him again? The door opened behind him. He didn't turn. "Ethan?" Clara's voice, hesitant now. "I just saw the courier leave. Did you—" "Yes." His voice was quiet, flat. "It's negative." She exhaled softly, stepping closer. "I'm sorry." He said nothing. Clara hesitated. Maybe she was mistaken. Maybe she believed it herself. "You've been through enough, Ethan. You don't owe her anything now." Her words washed over him, empty and distant. He turned from the window, the report still in his hand. "I need to see her. Ethan, I need to look her in the eye and hear the truth." That afternoon, the sky hung low and gray over the city. Rain whispered across the windshield as he drove toward Lena's apartment. His thoughts spun in silence. Anger, grief, confusion tangled like threads he could no longer separate. When she opened the door, she looked weaker than before. Her skin translucent, her eyes shadowed but bright. She tried to smile. "You came." He stepped inside, holding the envelope like a blade. The test came back. Something in her face faltered. "It says she's not mine." For a heartbeat, she didn't speak. Then softly, "That can't be right." "It's written here," he said, voice rising. 0%. You told me she was mine." "She is." "Then explain this." He thrust the report toward her, hands shaking. "Why would it say otherwise?" Lena sank into the couch, her breath unsteady. "I don't know. Maybe they made a mistake. Maybe the samples were mixed." "Don't," he snapped. "Don't lie again." She looked up at him, eyes wide with pain. "I'm not lying." He turned away, pacing across the small room. 8 years ago, you vanished. Now you send a child to my door, claiming she's mine. Do you know what that did to me?" Her voice broke. "Ethan, I did what I thought was right. I tried to tell you before, but you wouldn't listen. I didn't listen because I thought I knew the truth." He faced her, his voice raw. "And now I don't know anything." Mira appeared in the doorway, clutching her stuffed fox, eyes wide and frightened. "Why are you yelling?" Ethan froze. Lena stood quickly, moving to her daughter's side. "Sweetheart, it's okay. We're just talking." Mira's gaze shifted between them. "Are you mad at Mommy?" He swallowed hard. "No," he said softly. "I'm just confused." The child stepped forward, small and brave. "I don't care what the paper says," she whispered. "I think you're my dad." The words pierced him, sharp and pure. He knelt, looking into those eyes. His eyes. Or maybe not. He wanted to believe, God, he wanted to believe, but the weight of proof pressed down, cold and merciless. "I need time," he said finally. Mira nodded solemnly, though tears shimmered in her lashes. He rose and turned to Lena. "I'll continue covering your treatment, but after that, I can't promise anything." Lena's lips trembled. "Ethan, please," but he was already at the door. Outside, rain spilled over the gutters, the sky a curtain of gray. He stood there a long moment, the letter in one pocket, the report in the other, torn between two worlds, one built on hope, the other on evidence. That night, the penthouse felt colder than ever. He poured a glass of whiskey he didn't drink, staring at the city through walls of glass. Clara called once, twice. He ignored both. When his phone finally buzzed again, it wasn't Clara. It was a message from an unknown number, typed with uneven letters, each word careful and earnest. "Mr. Ethan, Mommy's crying. Did I do something wrong?" He closed his eyes. "No," he typed back, "you did nothing wrong." Another message came almost immediately. "Mommy says tests can be wrong. She says love is the truest proof." He stared at the screen, something shifting in the quiet spaces of his heart. For years, he had trusted data, numbers, certainties. But now, a 7-year-old's words felt heavier than science. He set the phone down, the message glowing in the dark like a small light in a vast room. Outside, the rain eased, the city exhaling beneath a thinning sky. Ethan leaned his forehead against the glass, torn between reason and something older, deeper, a whisper that told him the truth might not live on paper. And somewhere beyond the skyline a child waited, believing in him still. Morning rose gray and thin, light stretching across the city like a quiet ache. Ethan Vale had not slept. The report still lay open on his kitchen counter, its words stark as a verdict carved in stone. Yet every time he read them, something inside refused to believe. The numbers said no, but her eyes said yes. By the time he left his penthouse, the air carried the scent of rain and the hush of early commuters. He drove without thinking, guided by an instinct he didn't trust, until the skyline gave way to the narrow streets of Lena's neighborhood. Outside her building, he paused. Through the rain-streaked glass of the stairwell, he saw light spilling from her window. He climbed the steps slowly, unsure of what he'd say, only that he had to see them. When Lena opened the door, her surprise softened into something fragile and unsure. "Ethan, I needed to talk," he said quietly. Mira appeared behind her mother, still in pajamas, her hair tangled from sleep. When she saw him, her face lit with cautious hope. "You came back." He crouched to meet her eyes. "I told you I would." Lena stepped aside, letting him in. The apartment smelled faintly of tea and medicine. On the table sat a stack of bills, half opened, their edges curling like tired wings. Ethan's gaze caught on them, then shifted to Lena, who stood clutching her sweater closed around her thin frame. "We're managing," she said softly, following his eyes. "The clinic says the next phase of treatment starts next week." "I'll take care of it," he said, before she could protest. "Ethan," he shook his head. "Don't argue. You shouldn't be worrying about money." Mira tugged his sleeve. "Do you want to see my drawings?" He smiled faintly. I'd like that." She led him to the small corner near her bed where crayon sketches were taped to the wall. Bright suns, crooked houses, a woman with yellow hair holding hands with a tall man. In every picture, the man's eyes were gray. "That's you," she said, pointing. "And that's me and Mommy." Ethan studied the drawings, a quiet warmth rising through the confusion. In her world, the truth was simple. Love made it so. Mira pulled another sheet from her desk and held it out. "I made this one for you." It was a picture of 3 people standing under a sky of stars. In the corner, she had written one word, shaky but certain: family. His throat tightened. "It's beautiful." "Do you like stars?" she asked. "I do." "Mommy says they're wishes that never gave up." He looked down at her, at the fierce hope in her eyes, and something broke open in him, a longing he had buried beneath years of reason and fear. When she turned back to her crayons, he joined Lena by the kitchen counter. Her hands trembled as she poured tea. "You shouldn't have come," she whispered. "It's harder for her when you leave. I'm not sure I can stay away." Lena's eyes lifted to his, weary but steady. "The test said no. I know what it said." He took the cup from her hands and set it down. "But I also know what I see when I look at her. And at you." She closed her eyes, fighting tears. "Ethan, I swear to you, she's yours." "I believe you," he said, surprising himself with the certainty in his voice. "But belief isn't proof. Not yet. What will you do?" He looked toward the small figure coloring at the table. "Be here. For her. For you." Lena exhaled slowly, as though she'd been holding her breath for years. Mira turned then, holding up another drawing. "Can we go to the park today?" Lena started to speak, but Ethan answered first. "Yes, we can." The park was quiet, the air cool and damp from the night's rain. Mira ran ahead, her laughter scattering across the empty paths. Ethan followed at a slower pace, watching her chase pigeons near the fountain, her arms outstretched like wings. Lena sat beside him on a weathered bench, her hands tucked into her sleeves. "She hasn't laughed like this in weeks," she said softly. He glanced at her. "You've been carrying too much alone." "I didn't have a choice. You could have told me." "I tried," her voice broke. "But you were gone." The words hung between them, fragile as breath. He looked at her, really looked. The lines of her face, the quiet dignity even in illness, the love that had never dimmed. "I was blind," he said, "and too proud to see past what I thought I knew." She smiled faintly. "We were both broken back then." Mira ran back to them, cheeks flushed, holding a handful of damp flowers. She divided them evenly, placing one in Lena's lap and another in Ethan's hand. "You both get one," she declared. He stared at the small yellow bloom, its petals trembling in the breeze. Somehow it felt like an offering, a promise too pure to question. When they returned to the apartment, Mira curled on the couch with her stuffed fox, eyes heavy with sleep. Ethan sat across from Lena, watching the rise and fall of the child's breathing. "Do you ever think," he asked quietly, "that the truth doesn't live in papers or tests?" Lena looked at her daughter, then back at him. "Truth lives in what we choose to stand by." He nodded slowly. "Then I'll stand by her, whatever the test says." Tears shimmered in Lena's eyes. "You don't know what that means to me." "I think I do." As the light faded, Ethan rose to leave. Mira stirred, half awake, reaching out. "You'll come back?" He knelt beside her, always. She smiled, drifting back into dreams. Outside, the air smelled of rain and new beginnings. For the first time in years, Ethan felt something steady beneath his uncertainty. Not proof, not logic, but faith. As he walked toward his car, his phone buzzed with a message from the clinic. "Mr. Vale, there was an anomaly in the sample records. Please contact us as soon as possible." He stopped mid-step, the words blazing against the screen. Somewhere, truth was shifting. The wind stirred through the street, carrying the faint scent of lavender. He looked back at the window where a warm light glowed behind the curtains, and in that light he saw not doubt, but the fragile outline of a future waiting to be claimed. Ethan Vale sat in his car outside the apartment long after the lights dimmed behind the curtains. The message from the clinic burned across his phone screen like a flare in the dark. An anomaly in the sample records. He read it again and again. The world around him faded. The hum of traffic, the whisper of wind against the windshield, even the faint laughter echoing from distant windows. Only that line remained, pulsing like a heartbeat. Anomaly, a single word that reopened every wound he thought sealed. By morning, he was standing in the clinic's lobby, the same antiseptic air pressing against his skin. The receptionist recognized him and led him into a private office where Dr. Calder waited, glasses fogged slightly from the rain outside. "Mr. Vale," the doctor began gently, "I'm sorry for the confusion. During a systems check, our technicians discovered that your test was processed during a temporary power failure. Some data may have been corrupted." Ethan's voice was steady but sharp. "So, the result may be wrong." Dr. Calder hesitated. "It's possible, rare, but possible." Ethan leaned forward. "How rare?" "Less than 1%. But still, if the integrity of the sample chain was compromised, the conclusion cannot be trusted." Ethan exhaled slowly, the tension inside him coiling tighter. "Then I want it redone. New samples, maximum security, no access from anyone outside your core staff." Dr. Calder nodded. "I'll personally oversee it." When Ethan left the clinic, the clouds above the city hung heavy and unmoving, as if the sky itself were holding its breath. Back at the office, Clara Monroe waited outside his door, concern shadowing her features. "You disappeared again. Investors are asking questions. Tell them they'll get answers when I have them," he said, brushing past her. "Ethan." He turned, and for the first time she saw something raw behind his calm. "I've spent 8 years trusting evidence over instinct. Maybe I've been wrong." She said nothing as he closed the door. Inside the stillness of his office, he replayed every detail. Lena's eyes, Mira's drawings, the way the child had pressed a flower into his palm. Each memory felt like a thread leading toward something deeper, something that refused to be erased by a single sheet of paper. His phone vibrated again. A message from Lena. "Mira's at school. The doctor called. What does it mean?" He typed back. "It means we try again." That evening, he returned to the apartment with the steadiness of a man walking a tightrope. Lena opened the door, anxiety flickering in her expression. "I got your message," she said. "Does it mean—" "It means nothing yet, but there's a chance the test was wrong." Lena pressed a trembling hand to her mouth. I told you, Ethan." He reached out, steadying her shoulders. "We'll know soon, but until then, I don't want you worrying about anything else." "I can't help it," she whispered. "Everything feels so fragile." He guided her to the couch, his hand resting briefly over hers. "Then let me carry some of it." Mira burst through the doorway moments later, her school bag thudding to the floor. "You're here again!" she exclaimed, joy flashing across her face. Ethan smiled, something easing in him at the sight. "I promised I'd come back." Mommy said you're helping with her medicine. That's right. Mira tilted her head. Does that mean you're staying with us now? Lena's breath caught, but Ethan answered softly, For as long as you need me. Mira grinned, content with that, and ran to fetch her drawings. As she spread them across the table, Ethan watched her, each gesture, each small movement, and saw traces of himself hidden in her mannerisms, the way she frowned in concentration, the quiet determination in her voice. When Lena stepped into the kitchen to prepare tea, Ethan followed, lowering his voice. The clinic will redo the test under strict supervision, but I need to ask, has anyone else been involved? Anyone who might have access to the samples? Lena frowned. No one. I gave them exactly what they asked for. Why? He hesitated. Because someone might not want the truth to come out. She looked at him sharply. Who would do that? He thought of Clara, her subtle warnings, the calm insistence that he let go. Or perhaps someone else, someone from his past, a shadow he had mistaken for a friend. The possibility lodged in his chest like a thorn. I don't know, he said finally, but I'll find out. Later, as night fell, he helped Mira with her homework while Lena rested on the couch, her breathing shallow but peaceful. The small domesticity of the moment filled the room with warmth, a fragile illusion of the family they might have been all along. When it was time to leave, Mira walked him to the door. Will you read me a story next time? He crouched to meet her eyes. Yes, anyone you want. Good, she said, wrapping her arms around his neck. Because I think you're the best story. Her words settled deep within him, a truth too innocent to question. Outside, the streetlights flickered on, halos of gold against the wet pavement. He drove through the city with the envelope still in his glove compartment, the false report folded like a lie between the seats. By the time he reached his penthouse, the air had turned sharp, the sky streaked with restless clouds. He stood at the window, phone in hand, staring at the reflection of a man divided between reason and faith. Another message came through, this time from an unknown number. You should stop digging. Some truths are better buried. His blood chilled. He reread the message, fingers tightening around the phone. Someone was watching. Someone new. He typed back. Who is this? No reply. The city stretched out before him, vast and indifferent. But somewhere within its maze, a thread of deception wound through the lives of those he loved. He turned from the window, a decision hardening inside him. Tomorrow he would visit the clinic again. He would follow the chain of evidence until he reached its end. No more shadows. No more silence. This time, truth would have nowhere to hide. He glanced once more at the small flower Mira had given him, now resting in a glass of water by the window. Its petals had begun to fade, but still, it held its shape. Delicate, defiant, alive. Ethan whispered into the stillness, I'll find it, Mira. I'll find the truth for both of you. Outside, the wind rose, carrying the scent of rain and something else, something like hope, fragile but unyielding. Dawn crept through the city in silver light, brushing against the towers like a hand searching for answers. Ethan Vale hadn't slept. The message still glowed on his phone, a warning from an unseen voice. You should stop digging. He stood at the window, watching clouds gather above the skyline. Somewhere below, traffic murmured like restless thought. But inside, everything was still. The unease that had followed him since the first letter now burned sharper, urgent. By mid-morning, he was back at the clinic. Dr. Calder met him with a tense expression, a folder clutched in one hand. We've rerun the test, the doctor said quietly. New samples, isolated lab, double verification. And? Ethan's voice barely broke the silence. Dr. Calder opened the file, laying it on the desk between them. This time, the results are conclusive. He paused, meeting Ethan's eyes. Probability of paternity, 99.7%. The air shifted. The noise of the world seemed to fall away. Ethan stared at the line of text, his breath catching as though the room itself had narrowed around him. "She's mine," he whispered. Dr. Calder nodded. "Yes, there's no question." Ethan sank into the chair, the tension of weeks unraveling in quiet disbelief. Relief surged first, sharp, overwhelming, followed by a hollow ache for the time lost, the trust broken, the years he could never reclaim. He lifted his gaze. The first result, who had access? Dr. Calder frowned. "We're investigating, but the chain was compromised. A technician noted an unscheduled inquiry the day the system crashed." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Someone tampered with it." "It appears so." He rose, the folder clutched like proof of resurrection. "Thank you," he said, voice low, steady now with purpose. Outside, the light felt different, clearer, sharper, as if the city itself had been stripped of illusion. He drove without conscious thought, his mind already assembling the pieces. The voice warning him. The convenient timing of the outage. The insistence that he walk away. Clara Monroe. He didn't want to believe it. She had been loyal, present through every storm. But loyalty built on control was only another cage. At the office, she was waiting, as if she'd sensed what was coming. Her expression softened when she saw him, but beneath the calm, he saw tension, a flicker of recognition in her eyes that told him everything. "You've been busy," she said carefully. "I have." He set the folder on his desk. "I went back to the clinic." Something in her posture shifted, barely perceptible, but enough. "You didn't need to do that, Ethan. The first test was a lie," he cut in. "And I know you were involved." Her silence was stretched, brittle as glass. Then a breath. "I was trying to protect you." "From what? The truth?" "From her," Clara snapped, her calm unraveling. "You don't know what she's capable of. She left you broken once, Ethan. I couldn't let her do it again." He stepped closer, voice quiet but cutting. "You forged evidence, manipulated results. 8 years ago, you told me she betrayed me. You showed me pictures, messages, all lies, weren't they?" Clara's eyes shone with desperate anger. "She would have ruined you. You were finally building something real. I just kept you safe. You destroyed the one thing that mattered." Her breath hitched. "I did it because I love you." The words fell heavy in the room. Ethan's reply came soft, final. "No, Clara. You loved the control, not me." For a moment, she looked like a child lost in a maze she'd built herself. Then her shoulders squared. "What now? You'll throw me out? Hand me over to the board?" "I'll hand the truth to the authorities," he said, turning away. "You made your choice." She swallowed hard, eyes glistening. "You'll regret this. Not anymore." When she was gone, the office felt hollow, stripped of illusion. He stood at the window, the city sprawling below like a map of every wrong turn he'd taken. But for the first time, the path forward felt clear. He drove straight to Lena's apartment. She answered the door in a pale sweater, fatigue etched deep into her features. "Ethan," he held out the folder. "It's true." Her breath caught. "What? She's mine." The words hung in the air, and then Lena's knees buckled. He caught her before she fell, guiding her gently to the couch. Tears welled, spilling freely as she pressed a hand over her mouth. "I knew it," she whispered. "I knew it." Ethan knelt beside her, the weight of everything they'd lost pressing heavy between them. "I'm sorry I doubted you. I'm sorry I let lies steal our years." Lena shook her head, voice breaking. "You came back. That's what matters." From the hallway came a small voice. "Mommy?" Mira stood in the doorway, her stuffed fox in one hand, eyes wide and wondering. Lena reached for her daughter. "Sweetheart, Mr. Ethan has something to tell you." Ethan turned toward her, heart pounding. "Mira," he said softly, "we know now. The test, it says what we already felt." She blinked, cautious hope flickering. "You mean—" He smiled through the ache. "Yes, I'm your dad." For a moment, silence, then a burst of light across her face, joy breaking like dawn. She launched herself into his arms, her small frame trembling with relief. "I knew it," she whispered fiercely. "I told Mommy. I told the stars." Ethan held her tight, eyes closing against the surge of emotion. This small, brave soul, his daughter, had believed when he could not. Lena watched them through tears, her smile trembling. For the first time in years, the room felt whole. Later, when Mira had drifted into sleep, Ethan sat beside Lena on the couch, the city lights flickering beyond the window. "What will you do about her?" Lena asked quietly. "Clara, she'll face the truth she tried to bury." Lena nodded, her gaze distant. "Do you think it will ever stop hurting?" "Maybe not," he said, eyes on the sleeping child. "But now we can start healing." She reached for his hand, and he took it without hesitation. For the first time, silence between them felt peaceful, not heavy. Outside, the clouds parted, and a single star burned through the haze, small, steady, defiant. Ethan whispered, more to himself than anyone, "No more lies." The star flickered, and somewhere in the quiet the future began to breathe. Spring arrived quietly, like a breath the city had forgotten to release. Weeks had passed since the truth emerged, since the test erased every lie and left only what had always been: a father, a mother, a child, bound by more than blood. Ethan Vale stood on the balcony of his penthouse, watching sunlight strike the water below. The air smelled of rain and renewal. Behind him, laughter spilled from the living room, high, bright, the sound of a child who no longer feared the silence. Mira darted through the space with a paper crown on her head, her stuffed fox tucked under one arm. "Daddy, look," she cried. "I'm a queen now." He turned, smiling, still not used to the word daddy resting so easily on her tongue. "A queen needs a castle," he said. She grinned. "We already have one." Lena's voice drifted from the kitchen, warm and steady. "Your father's castle doesn't count if it doesn't have flowers." Ethan crossed the room, pausing in the doorway. Lena stood at the counter arranging tulips in a glass vase, the light catching her hair as it began to grow back in soft, golden wisps. Her strength had returned slowly, like dawn after a long night. "You shouldn't be on your feet so long," he said gently. She glanced over her shoulder with a small smile. "You sound like an old man." "Maybe I am," he teased. "You're not old," Mira interrupted. "You're perfect." Lena laughed softly. "See? You can't argue with royalty." Ethan stepped closer, resting a hand against the counter. "The doctor said your last scan was clear." She nodded, tears brightening her eyes. "They call it remission. I call it a second chance." He reached for her hand, threading his fingers through hers. "We'll build something new from it. No more half-lives." For a long moment, neither spoke. The city stretched beyond the windows, alive and endless, But everything that mattered was here, in this room, in the quiet rhythm of their joined hands. Later that afternoon, they walked together through the park where Mira had once chased pigeons beneath a gray sky. Now, the trees wore green crowns, and the air carried the hum of spring. Mira skipped ahead, her laughter scattering through sunlight. Lena leaned into Ethan's arm. I used to bring her here when I was too tired to walk far. She'd sit on the swings and tell me stories about the father she dreamed of. He swallowed the ache rising in his chest. What did she say? That he'd be kind, Lena whispered. That he'd listen. That he'd love her no matter what. Ethan watched his daughter running through dappled light, her crown slipping sideways. I'll spend the rest of my life becoming that man. Lena smiled, her eyes shining. You already are. They stayed until the sky blushed gold, until Mira's energy faded into yawns and sleepy murmurs. As they walked home, Ethan thought of the letter that had begun it all, fragile paper carrying the weight of truth across years of silence. That night, after Mira fell asleep, he found the letter framed on the bookshelf. He lifted it carefully, tracing the handwriting that had once shattered him and saved him all at once. She deserves truth. She deserves you. He turned as Lena appeared behind him, her robe gathered at her waist. I want to keep it where she can see it, he said softly. So she'll know what courage looks like. She already knows, Lena whispered. She learned it from love. He set the frame back down and pulled her close. For a moment, the world was still. Just breath, warmth, and the quiet heartbeat of a life restored. Weeks passed into months. The office at Vale Dynamics transformed with him. Where once walls held only architectural awards, now photographs lined the shelves. Mira in a sun hat at the beach, Lena laughing beside a picnic basket. The three of them caught mid-laughter, imperfect and whole. Clara Monroe faced the consequences of her deception. Her confession came quietly, her voice hollow with regret. Ethan didn't attend the hearing. Some truths, once spoken, required no more words. He learned to leave the past where it belonged, not forgotten, but forgiven. One evening in early summer, the three of them stood on the terrace watching the city lights bloom like stars. Mira leaned against the railing, her eyes wide. Mommy, Daddy, do you think the stars can see us? Lena smiled. Maybe they're looking down to see how brave you've been. Mira turned to Ethan, her voice soft. Do you still have Mommy's letter? He nodded. It's right here. He touched his heart. I keep it with me always. She considered this, then smiled. Then I think the stars already know. They stood together in the warm evening air, the city murmuring beneath them, the past folded into the hush of the present. Later, as Mira drifted to sleep, Ethan read her a story not from a book, but from memory. A story of a little girl who carried a letter through a world too busy to see her, and a man who learned that truth was written not in ink, but in the spaces between silence. When the story ended, she whispered, half dreaming, That's us, isn't it? He brushed a strand of hair from her forehead. Yes, he said softly. That's us. She smiled, her breathing slowing, and he sat beside her until the room filled with the gentle rhythm of her dreams. In the living room, Lena waited, the soft glow of lamplight tracing her features. Ethan joined her on the couch, taking her hand. We made it, she said. He nodded. Through every lie, every silence. Now what? He smiled faintly. Now we live, every day, fully. Outside, a breeze swept through the open window, carrying the scent of tulips and distant rain. The city hummed with life, but within their home there was peace, earned and real. Ethan rose and crossed to the balcony. The horizon shimmered with lights, but above them the stars burned steady. He thought of the years he had spent searching for certainty in numbers, proof in data, and realized the truth had always been simpler, written in the courage of a child, the strength of a woman, the heart that had learned to trust again. Behind him, Lena's voice drifted soft and sure. "What are you thinking about?" He turned, eyes warm. "How sometimes the smallest hands carry the greatest truths." She smiled. "And how sometimes love finds its way back." He reached for her, and together they stood beneath the endless sky, their silhouettes framed by starlight and second chances. For the first time in years, Ethan Vale felt whole, not because the world had forgiven him, but because he had learned to forgive himself. And in the quiet he whispered the words that had started it all, words now transformed by love and light. "Please, sir, read this letter." He smiled. "I already have." The city shimmered, the stars held steady, and the story, theirs finally, burned bright into forever.